Hey there, everyone. Welcome to reading class on this Tuesday. Let's look up our vocab words first, and just a regular encouragement as you do these vocab words each day for your daily assignment, too. Don't forget to look them up. I'm still getting the occasional answer down. That's a good definition, but it's not the right definition that fits where it fit in our story, okay? So don't forget to always look these up to make sure your definitions are matching. Let's practice that right now. So third paragraph down on 56 starts problem was. Problem was Amanda was always reading it, and she vowed she wasn't giving it up, not even to Maniac, till she had read everything from Aardvark to Aztec. This is kind of a funny part of the book, right, where Maniac Magee wanted to read the A encyclopedia. Why anyone would want to read an encyclopedia, who knows? But Amanda and Maniac are both like people who love knowledge, and this is before the internet. Maybe you surf the internet trying to learn things and pick up new facts. In the olden days, you read the encyclopedias. That's how you learned random things and interesting things. But Amanda vowed not to give it up until she was done reading it. So what does vowed mean? That's another word you can use often in a wedding, too. You do your wedding vows, right? Vowed means promised. So Amanda promised she's never given it up until she gets done. Then you can finally look at it, right? So she promised. All right, moving on to 57. Veering. Second paragraph, the one that's got he could see Mars bar. I'm going to jump to the middle. He could see Mars bar charging from behind to tackle him, even when he didn't have the football. He could see Mars bar's bike veering for a nearby puddle to splash water on him. So these are all the parts about how, Maniac Magee was kind of made fun of and teased by a lot of the people in both sides of town, really. And this is one of the ways Mars bar would tease or torture Maniac, sadly, because Maniac's a little different, right? Certainly he has a different color skin. But he also, he's a unique guy. He's just really nice, acts a little different, dresses a little different from everyone. And sadly, that's often the people who get bullied in our world, isn't it? It's a sad fact that sometimes people in our world bully people just for being different. Out of love for Christ, don't let that be something you do in your life. I'm sure you'll see that in high school, those of you going next year, and I'm sure you see that from time to time, and even in our school. Be careful. We never want to give people a hard time just because they're different. Finally, we say that's the way God made them, and our world is a better place because people are different, right? So one of the things Mars bar would do is he would veer into a puddle. Veer means to turn suddenly, so turning suddenly. So if he saw a Maniac coming, he'd turn suddenly into a puddle next to him and splash him. Really not nasty thing, right? Ranting, page 61. Come join me there. Ranting is in the very last paragraph. Suddenly, Hester and Lester, second to last paragraph, were by Maniac's side, barking at the man. You leave him alone, old rag picker. You shut up. No, that wasn't a nice thing that they yelled. We shouldn't yell that. And the man was croaking, ranting, not to Maniac now, but to the people. What happens when we go over there? Black is black, white is white. So this was the part of the book where we ran into some racism, right? When Maniac Magee was jumping in the fire hydrant. In the olden days, I don't think they do this much anymore, but in the olden days, on really hot days, before there were a lot of nice city pools and things, they would open up the city fire hydrants, that the fire station would hook up to if there was a fire, and just let them spray water all over the street to let people cool off. And so Maniac was there. Now remember, he's on the black side of town. And there's this one racist black man. There's racist people of all different colors, right? There are racist white people, sadly, and racist black people, sadly, because we live in a sin-filled world. And remember, this book is taking place in a time where racism was probably more common even than it is today, especially open racism like this. And so this man starts ranting that he should go to the other side of town. He doesn't belong here. White is white, black is black, right? Get out of here, move along, right? So ranting is like a loud speech. Often it's like an angry speech. So he's just talking and talking and talking and just saying nasty thing after nasty thing after nasty thing. And Hester and Lester, tried to yell at him back. And unfortunately, they used the word shut up and weren't the kindest about it either. But they should have probably just walked away, right? But that's what was going on. All right, as far as the questions go, you were asked about hyperboles in number 1. And I probably could have done a better job introducing these in the video. I apologize. So I tried to make it clear in the question that you got. There's a little bit more words than what you see here, what a hyperbole is. A hyperbole is an extreme exaggeration. Like if I say, oh, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse, or I'm so fast I could outrun a cheetah, right? If you ever exaggerate extremely, it's called a hyperbole. People do it to make a point. They want you to take them seriously. couple other common hyperboles that maybe you've heard before are like, this bag weighs a ton, or that man is as tall as a house, or this is the worst day of my life. Now, is it really the worst day of someone's life? Probably not. Or my dad will kill me if he finds that out, right? Those are all hyperboles, things that we don't really say because we mean it 100% true. It's just we're exaggerating to try to get people to make a point or get people to listen to us, right? So I love the hyperboles at the beginning of chapter 17. Here it is again. It was so hot if you stood too long in the vacant lot, the sun bouncing off a chunk of broken glass or metal could fry a patch on your hide. In other words, on your backside and your butt. So hot if you were packing candy. In other words, if you had candy in your pockets, you had soup in your pocket by 2 o'clock. So hot the dogs were tripping on their own tongues. So obviously it wasn't that hot. It was hot, but those are some extreme exaggerations. So you could have written any of those three down. Number 2 said, while Maniac was playing in the water of the fire hydrant, what did a black man come up to him and call him? What was making this man upset? So he came up to him, and this was a racist situation, right? It was, we see stereotypes that this man does about white people, and so this is a very racist situation, very prejudiced situation that we see. And the man calls him Whitey, and what's he so upset about? Well, he doesn't like that a white boy is living on the black side of town, right? And he's like, yeah, white people never can have enough. They just want what all black people have, right? And so he just, again, you see stereotypes there, right? This idea that all white people dislike blacks and are out to get them. And of course, Maniac Magee doesn't fit that. And that's a bad stereotype. And so notice racism happens both ways, from white people to black people and black people to white people. In our sin-filled world, sadly, we see racism from time to time, and Maniac faced that. And what a sad thing. And it's just a reminder to us to treat all races with respect, right? Why were Hester and Lester and Amanda trying to distract Maniac from going home towards the end of the chapter? Or did they not want him to see? So apparently there were some other hateful people in the neighborhood too that didn't really want a white boy there, even though he was so nice. Isn't that sad? And so they wrote on the wall of his house, "Fish belly, go home." It doesn't seem like the most terrible thing, but fish belly was, back in that time, was kind of like, an idiot is kind of what that word would mean, like idiot, go home. And so not a nice thing at all that was written on his house, and his mom, or Amanda's mom, was trying to wipe it off the wall quick before he came home. So Hester and Lester and Amanda were trying to distract him, but they weren't able to do it well enough. He came home and he saw most of the message, right? And he felt really bad about that. What was Maniac doing then at the beginning of chapter 18 that made Amanda so upset? He kept talking about how he wanted to leave and just go live somewhere and run away, and he'll be fine, don't worry about me. And that just was making Amanda so mad. And what was the scariest part for Amanda? Second to last big paragraph on the bottom of the page, she says she hated it, an answer for everything. And the scariest part was he was probably right. If anybody could survive on the loose, it would be this kid who showed up from Hollidaysburg. So what scared Amanda the most? She was really scared that Maniac actually probably could run away and do fine. She's seen him do some amazing things already, right, and survive in some tough situations, and that scares her because when Maniac talks about running away, she knows that he probably would survive and actually be somewhat okay, and that scares her because she likes having him live there. Maybe you've noticed that by now. So she's scared that he's actually going to do this. That was the scariest part, that he probably would be fine, and she did not want him to do that, right? So what did Amanda say that hurt Maniac's feelings? She probably shouldn't have, kept, bugging him about it. And, Maniac, when he was coming up with all these excuses for how he's going to be fine. Finally, Amanda thinks of something she thinks might keep him there. She's like, you can't get my books if you run away. And then Maniac just says, well, I'll just join the library. And so then Amanda goes, well, then you're going to need a library card. You can't get and so Maniac's like, well, I'll just get a library card. And then Amanda said the hurtful thing. She said, you can't get a library card without an address. And that hurt Maniac's feelings because he had always wanted an address, right? And you can see how proud he was to live at the Beals house for a while. And to hear her say that you don't have an address, right, is like her rejecting him, saying you don't really truly belong here either. Does that make sense? So it hurt his feelings that Amanda said you have no address. And you can tell that's one of the things Maniac Magee wants the most. So that was kind of a hurtful thing. So what plan did Amanda come up with to help Maniac be more liked in the neighborhood? Now, if you didn't read ahead, you don't know any details about the plan. You maybe even went, what is that all about? If you read ahead, you know what it means. But notice some kids would come to Maniac to get his knots untied, like this yo-yo this little kid brought, and Maniac was so good at getting knots untied. So Amanda goes, I'm going to tell him all about cobble knot. Now, if you didn't read ahead, that's all you needed to put. She had some idea dealing with some cobble's knot. That's all you really knew. Now, if you read ahead, you know a little bit more about what she meant by that. So don't feel bad if you were confused by that and you just put something about a knot or whatever. That's fine. Now, that was her plan. She's got a plan to get people to like Maniac more so they don't try to chase him away from living there in the black side of town. So we'll see how that goes. I want to bring our faith into this discussion that we just had in this last chapter about racism a little bit. You are going to run into people who are hateful and hurtful and say harmful things to you, maybe even racist things to you someday. It's just the fact. Living in the sinful world that we do, we're surrounded by sin all the time. And there are going to just be people who say nasty things about you or gossip about you or say hurtful things to you from time to time. So how would God have us react when that happens? He does talk about that. Proverbs chapter 25, verses 21 and 22 says this: "If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you." So how does God want us to treat those people that we might even consider our enemies? People who say and do hurtful and harmful things to us. Did you see what he said? He said, give your enemies things to eat. Give them things to drink. Now, not literally. He's like, hey, you've been mean to me. Here, have some food. Now, what God is getting at is he wants you to be kind in many different ways to the people who are mean to you. Show nothing but kindness to them. And notice what God says will happen if you're kind even to your enemies. There's this interesting phrase, you will heap burning coals on his head. Think of how it would feel to have burning coals heaped on your head. Ouch, right? That would burn. That would wake you up pretty quickly. Do you see what God's getting at? God's saying when some people are hateful or hurtful towards you, but when you have the opportunity, you're loving towards them, it's going to make them feel bad. It's going to make them hurt and realize what they did. For instance, think about this. Maybe a bully passes you in a school hallway and you're carrying a pile of books and he knocks it out of your hands onto the floor and makes a big mess and makes you have to clean it up. Okay, and so you do clean it up and you pick it up and you go to class. And then maybe you're walking down the hall the next day and you see that same bully drop his own books on the floor. And you decide you're going to bend over and help him pick them up. Can you imagine the look on his face when you hand those books back to him and help him out? It would probably be a look of shock because he'd probably be thinking, wow, I was so nasty to that person yesterday and now they're helping me out today. And I guarantee you, for most people, well, not everyone, but most people, you probably won't have the books knocked out of your hands by that person again. Maybe you will. But in many cases, that bully is going to be like, wow, I'm kind of a jerk. I knocked that person's books out and they're nothing but nice to me. And so God tells us that this is the way he wishes for us to react to the people who make us angry or the people who we might even consider our enemies. God wants us to be loving even to them. Now, is that easy? No way. That's hard. We all get angry and upset and lose our tempers sometimes when people are not so nice to us, right? And God forgive us for that. That's a sin, to lose our temper and our anger, to say unkind things. God calls those all things sins, right? But with the help of Jesus, motivated by the love of Jesus, God can give us the strength to show love even to our enemies. Because, guys, that's what Jesus does for you. Every day you and I sin against him. We hurt him. We do things he tells us not to do. And he finally had to take all those sins on himself on the cross. Jesus suffered punishment for every sin you committed. You hurt him every day with your sin. And yet, Jesus still says, I love you. I want to die for you. And then he did. And so when we see that, we go, wow, that's amazing. And I love Jesus so much and want to thank him for doing that I want to be kind even to the people in my life that are hard to be kind to. So I want you to think right now, who is that person in your life that's hard to get along with? Maybe it's someone in your family right now as you're quarantined inside with them that's just hard to get along with. What are some nice things you can do even for that person today? Or if it's someone at school or in your neighborhood or on a team that you're on, what are some ways that you can show them love, even if it's hard? Because Jesus loves you and that's your motivation. And who knows, maybe you'll wake them up and help them to learn how to be more kind and hopefully, even more importantly, learn about their Savior Jesus. So we're going to use this word as our code word today, coals. And I would encourage you, I know I gave the code word away already, but encourage you to read along the next section with us too. It's pretty short to hear the discussion we have on that section too. So that's our code word for today. Let's read. All right, here we go, 68. If the wonders of the world hadn't stopped at 7, Cobble's knot would have been number 8. So here's the legend of that knot, right? Nobody knows how it got there. As the story goes, the original Mr. Cobble wasn't doing too well with the original Cobble's Corner Grocery at the corner of Hector and Birch, this little grocery store, right? In his first 2 weeks, all he sold was some Quaker oats and penny candy. Then one morning, as he unlocked the front door for business, he saw the knot. It was dangling from the flagpole that hung over the big picture window, the one that said Frosted Foods in icy and blue-white letters. He got out a pair of scissors and was about to snip it off when he noticed what an unusual and incredible knot it was. And then he got an idea. He could offer a prize to anyone who untangled the knot. Publicize it. Call the newspaper. Winner's picture on the front page, Cobble's corner in the background. Business would boom. Well, he went ahead and did it. And if business didn't exactly boom, it must have at least peeped a little, because eons later, when Maniac Magee came to town, Cobble's corner was still there. Only now it sold pizza instead of groceries. And the prize was different. It had started out being 60 seconds alone with the candy counter, like you got to pick as much candy as you could in 60 seconds for free, right? Now it was one large pizza per week for a whole year, which in time made the knot practically priceless. Which is why, after leaving it outside for a year, Mr. Cobble took it down and kept it in a secret place inside the store, and brought it out only to meet a challenger. If you look at old pictures in the 2 Mill Times, that's the newspaper, you see that the knot was about the size and shape of a lopsided volleyball. Holy smoke, that's a huge knot, right? It was made of string, but it had more contortions, ins and outs, twists and turns, and dips and doodles than the brain of Albert Einstein himself. It had defeated all comers for years, including J.J. Thorndike, who grew up to be a magician, and Fingers Holloway, who grew up to be a pickpocket. So notice this legend. It's just kind of silly. It's funny. Hardly a week went by without somebody taking a shot at the knot and losing. And each loser added to the glory that awaited someone who could untie it. So you see, said Amanda, if you go up there and untie Cobble's knot, which I know you can, you'll get your picture in the paper, and you'll be the biggest hero around here, and nobody'll mess with you then. Maniac listened and thought about it, and finally gave a little grin. Maybe you're just after the pizza, since you know I can't eat it. Amanda screeched, Jeffrey! The pizza's not the point. She started to hit him. He laughed and grabbed her wrists, and he said, okay, you give it a try. Top of page 70, chapter 20. They brought out the knot and hung it from the flagpole. They brought out the official square wooden table for the challenger to stand on, and from the moment Maniac climbed up, you could tell the knot was in big trouble. To the ordinary person, Cobble's knot was about as friendly as a nest of yellow jackets. By the way, simile, right? Comparison using like or as. Besides the tangle itself, there was the weathering of that first year, when the knot hung outside and became as hard as a rock. You could barely make out the individual strands. It was grimy, moldy, crusted over. Here and there a loop stuck out, maybe big enough to stick your pinky through. Pitiful testimony to the challengers who had tried and failed. And there stood Maniac, turning the knot, checking it out. Some say there was a faint grin on his face, a smile on his face. Kind of playful, as though the knot wasn't his enemy at all, but an old pal just playing a little trick on him. Others say his mouth was more grim, serious, than grin. That his eyes lit up like flashbulbs because he knew he was finally facing a knot that would stand up and fight, a worthy opponent. He lifted it in his hands to feel the weight of it. He touched it here and touched it there, gently, daintily. He scraped a patch of crust off with his fingernail. He laid his fingertips on it, as though feeling for a pulse. Only a few people were watching at first, and half of them were Hex Angels, a roving tricycle gang of 4- and 5-year-olds. Isn't that kind of funny? There's a little tricycle gang. Most of them had sneaker lace or yo-yo knots untied by Maniac, and they expected this would only take a couple of seconds longer. When the seconds became minutes, they started getting antsy, and before 10 minutes had passed, they were zooming off in search of somebody to terrorize. I just think that's the cutest thing ever, this little tricycle gang of 4- and 5-year-old kids riding bikes. Anyways, the rest of the spectators watched Maniac poke and tug and pick at the knot. Never a big polar yank, just his fingertips touching and grazing and pecking away like some little bird. Another simile, right? What's he doing? Somebody said. What's taking so long? He gonna do it or not? After an hour, except for a few more finger-sized loops, all Maniac had to show for his trouble were the flakes of knot crust that covered the table. He ain't even found the end of the string yet, somebody grumbled, and almost everybody but Amanda took off. Maniac never noticed. He just went right on working. By lunchtime, they were all back, and more kept, top of 72, coming. Not only kids, but grown-ups too, black and white, because Cobble's corner was on Hector, and word was racing through the neighborhoods on both the east and west sides of the street. So think about it this way. This restaurant is right on the street. So here's the street that separates the black end from the east, the white end, right? And so Hector's or Cobble's pizza store is right here. So people from the white side come over and see, and people from the black side come over and see. So he's bringing people of both races together to see what's going on. Kind of cool. Let's see. What people saw, they didn't believe. Second paragraph. The knot had grown, swelled, exploded. It was a frizzy globe. The newspaper the next day described it as a gigantic hairball. Now, except for a packed-up clump in the center, it was practically all loops. You could look through it and see Maniac calmly working on the other side. He found the end, somebody gasped, and the corner burst into applause. Meanwhile, inside, Cobbles was selling pizzas left and right, not to mention Zeps. Remember, those are subs, right? A 2 mils type of hoagie. Steak sandwiches, strombolis, and gallons of soda. Mr. Cobble himself came out to offer Maniac some pizza, which Maniac, of course, politely turned down. He did accept an orange soda, though. And then a little kid whose sneaker laces Maniac had untied many a time handed up to him a 3-pack of Tasty Cake butterscotch crimpets. After polishing off the crimpets, Maniac did the last thing anybody expected. He lay down and took a nap right there on the table. This book just cracks me up. I love that. The knot hanging above him like a small hairy planet, the mob buzzing all around him. Maniac knew what the rest of them didn't. The hardest part was yet to come. He had to find the right routes to untangle the mess, or it would just close up again like a rock and probably stay that way forever. He would need the touch of a surgeon, top of 73, the alertness of an owl, the cunning of 3 foxes, and the foresight of a grand master in chess. To accomplish that, he needed to clear his head, to flush away all distractions, especially the memory of the butterscotch crimpets, which had already hooked him, so he doesn't want to think about these delicious pieces of food. He wants to focus, right? In exactly 15 minutes, so he just took a 15-minute nap, he woke up and started back in. Like some fairy tale tailor, he threaded the end through the maze, dipping and doodling through the openings the way he squiggled a football through a defense. As the long August afternoon boiled along, the exploded knot hairball would cave in here and cave in there. It got lumpy, out of shape, saggy. The Times photographer, made starbursts with his camera. In other words, he took a bunch of pictures. Boom, 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 right? The people munched on Cobble's pizza and spilled out across Hector from sidewalk to sidewalk and said, "Oh, ah!" And then around dinner time, a huge roar went up, a volcano of cheers. Cobble's knot was dead. Undone, gone. It was nothing but string. Okay, you'll get to see what happens after he gets the knot out. We'll see if Amanda's plan actually works and people start respecting him, or if he still faces a lot of that same hate. Enjoy the next part of the book. Hopefully you're enjoying this book. It's just a silly, kind of funny book from time to time. That's what I like about it. Enjoy, guys.